Good afternoon, short story writers. Today's short story idea from the things that surround us, we're going to look at light bulbs, mainly because obviously a lot of people have got Christmas decorations up at the moment, and that involves a lot of LED light bulbs. So I'm going to use the larger light bulbs for this fiction writing prompt. And as usual, we take the object and ask the two questions: what problems can it cause, or what problems can it solve? And the other questions: what do light bulbs do? What happens if we make them bigger? We can start with this. Make yourself a list. What happens if we make them smaller, even smaller than LED size, so that they may be the size of a pinhead, but still giving out as much light. Heavier, um, I won't say lighter, I'll say having less weight. Um, what happens if they do the opposite? What happens if they suck in light and absorb it rather than providing a light source? How would that be useful in a science fiction or a fantasy or a horror story, or even perhaps in a science based thriller or action drama? Um, then, okay, what problems can they solve? Obviously, there's a blackout, and you have perhaps some independent power supply, maybe a bunch of batteries somewhere that you can hook up and have hooked up ready in times of inclement weather, and in some areas of the world that would include during storms, tempests, whirlwind attacks. There's an idea. It's a title for a novel, isn't it? Whirlwind attack. Um, could they be used for their heat purposes to slowly warm fluids so that people can maybe the fluids have to be a certain temperature before they can become active to be injected to act as a some sort of life-saving inoculation. Again, that would tap into um, the more science fiction and fantasy thing. But even in a literary fiction scenario, you could use that in a Médecins Sans Frontières, kind of doctors in places where the facilities are somewhat less than developed. Um, a kind of battery operated light bulb which warms medicines up so they become active at a certain temperature. Um, what problems could they cause? And that again would be in the middle of a power cut. Perhaps if you are the only house with a light source, then people might think that you've got power, and therefore, if it's a spell of very bad weather, they might decide to break into your house. And again, I could see the applications there for literary fiction, for science fiction, for fantasy based fiction, horror, and also for actions, thrillers. And one of it's not the greatest movie ever, but it's 11 Cloverfield Lane, I think it is, and it's set in a house. And there are many fantasy type scenarios like that, but there's a certain amount of literariness about that particular um, film because it explores the dynamics between the person who is rescuing the main character and also his emotional and psychological state and hers. Um, so it's not just a straight thriller stroke science fiction story, and it is set in a dystopian future. So there are ways of interweaving all these themes. What other problems could a light bulb? Well, I can think of one more. This is what started me off. You could cut off the top and actually put fluid inside if you wanted to bring back a sample from some remote and inhospitable place. So it could act as a flask if that was all that you had. Although why you would have a bulb in the middle of that scenario and not a flask, I don't know. That would be you as a story writer to set that up so that the plausibility rang true. It could cause a problem if it were acting as the light source in a lighthouse and it blew and there was a storm brewing and then people were going to die. And I'm not sure what genre that would fit into, but I'm pretty sure. Are there going to be lighthouses or beacons in space? Or on Mars or on the moon? I'm sure maybe there would be to avoid craters and things if you. I don't know. I mean, again, you're the story writer, it's your story. But these are ideas, and it doesn't have to be a light bulb. You can think, well, okay, that's the scenario, but a light bulb won't fit it. But I want a scenario where something fails and therefore there is danger to people and they might fall into, not fall on the rocks literally, but fall into a pit, for example. Lights are put up to stop drivers hitting roadworks along Dolan's Cadillac. Now, there is one excellent story. Yes, Dolan, I'm going to leave you with that recommendation. Stephen King, in my mind, he is worthy of the title of America's Charles Dickens. But that, to me, is based on two stories in particular: Dolores Claiborne and Dolan's Cadillac. He's written some other really excellent ones. And in my humble opinion, and Mr. King, this is in no way meant as any kind of, it's my humble opinion, my taste. But when you write, when he writes, if you're watching Mr. King, I'm honoured. When you write about humans as monsters, my goodness, they are terrifying. And I personally find the horror genre somewhat humorous. So I Carrie's fantastic as well, and so is your second novel, Salem's Lot. Um, those alone. And of course, I'm leaving out the Shawshank Redemption. The Shawshank Redemption, mind blowing. So those five stories, in my opinion, Stephen King, the best ever American writer. Um, and of course, one of the most prolific. He turns out a book a year, and there's been a lot of them. So, yes, time to go.